HOA Karen called the cops on me for carrying groceries into my own apartment. Yes, my groceries. My bags. My door. Her meltdown. Welcome to the community. I'd moved into Cedar Pines condominiums 3 months ago, a quaint cluster of beige boxes that all smell faintly of dryer sheets and fermented rules. I picked it for the big windows, the quiet, and because it was the only place in the city that didn't charge extra for a cat who looks like a judgmental baked potato. Day 1, I met Karen, our HOA president, standing under the notice board like a gargoyle with a highlights appointment. She wielded a clipboard that, I swear, must have been forged in Mordor. You could feel the paperwork radiation from 10 feet away. Welcome, she said, in the tone people use when they find gum on their shoe. We value community standards. I smiled and promised not to set the building on fire with my non-compliant curtains or whatever fresh since she sniffed out. Then I did the most rebellious thing imaginable. I lived my life. I watered plants. I worked late. I baked bread once, and the smell alone attracted a swarm of retired inspectors who needed to know if yeast had a permit. The day of the great grocery incident was a Tuesday, which is to say it had the emotional range of cold oatmeal. I just endured a meeting where someone said, "Circle back," so many times I got dizzy. I swung by the discount market, heroically won the last spot in the parking lot from a man who'd been signaling since April, and lugged up a week's worth of food. Pasta, tomatoes, coffee, yogurt, an irresponsible amount of peaches, and a watermelon that had the exact weight and personality of a bowling ball. When I reached the front gate, there she was, Karen in her natural habitat, supervising the mailboxes. Her expression said the building had been personally betrayed. "What?" she announced. "Do we have here?" "Groceries," I said, because I'm a scholar of the obvious. She had the bags like they were contraband parrots. "Deliveries must be registered. We've had incidents." "These aren't deliveries," I said. "They're carryings. By me. From my car. To my mouth." Karen didn't blink. The HOA needs to know what products are being brought in. Because the hallway might develop a gluten allergy? She glanced at my watermelon. That is clearly a shared amenity. It's a fruit, not a hot tub. Karen took a prim step closer, perfume sharp as a boardroom threat. "We have a communal gathering this weekend. You are new. It would be a gesture of goodwill to provide." She poked the watermelon, refreshments. There it was, the community tax. I laughed. Not a generous laugh. More a tiny, tired cough of disbelief. "Sure, I'll bring chips. This is my breakfast." Her lips thinned. The clipboard lifted. "I'm noting your refusal to cooperate." "Noted. I plan to eat my groceries." Bold, I know. I nudged past her, bags biting the insides of my fingers, keys performing a Cirque du Soleil act somewhere in my pocket. Karen followed me across the lobby, heels ticking like a countdown. On the wall, the HOA bulletin shone with commandments. No doormats with humorous slogans. No planters wider than 6 inches. No bicycles with excessive personality. I'd once seen her put a post-it on a fern. As I approached the elevator, Karen reached out, fast, and pinched the top of a bag. A peach tumbled out, executed a perfect double axel off the tile, and made a break for the baseboard. "Ma'am," she said, in that voice that makes you want to reassess every life choice. "These items should be stored in the community kitchen until verified. I don't think my fridge will pass a background check. This is for everyone's safety. Yes, heaven forbid an unregistered nectarine infiltrate the HOA." Her smile bared teeth. "If you continue to be difficult, I will have to escalate. I've worked in tech long enough to speak fluent escalate. It means I'm about to weaponize a policy I barely understand." I could have apologized. I could have offered the watermelon. Instead, fatigue stirred my inner raccoon. I bent, snagged the runaway peach, and, looking her dead in the eyes, took a very dramatic bite. Juice ran down my wrist. The elevator dinged open like a drum roll. Karen inhaled. "You can't eat evidence." Delicious, incriminating evidence. I stepped into the elevator and, because I'm a saint, tapped hold door. "Want a slice?" Her nostrils flared like a horse sensing weather. "I am calling the police." I laughed again, because the alternative was to start screaming into a decorative ficus. Karen, you're not calling the cops over fruit. Not just the fruit, she hissed. The groceries. The pattern of non-cooperation. The disrespect for shared resources. Behind her, Mr. Diaz from 2A shuffled in with his mail and a crossword. He took in the scene with the patience of a man who's seen the ocean and knows tides will tide. Evening, he said. Is there a fight or can I pass? Emergency, Karen said. Community emergency. It's Peaches, I told him. They're armed. Mr. Diaz raised his eyebrows, then did the bravest thing possible in an HOA building. He ignored us and ambled away. Karen whipped out her phone like a sheriff drawing at high noon. I could see her screen reflected in the metal elevator panel. She dialed with vicious precision, already squaring her shoulders for the performance. I had two options: retreat to my apartment and let the madness knock on my door, or stand here and witness what fresh nonsense an adult woman would tell a 911 operator about produce. I planted my feet. Hello, Karen said crisply. I need officers dispatched to Cedar Pines condominiums. We have a situation involving theft and possible intimidation. My eyebrows tried to leave my face. Theft? Of what vitamin C? She shushed me with a finger, an actual librarian shush, and continued. A resident is transporting large quantities of groceries under suspicious circumstances. He has refused to surrender communal goods. The operator said something. Karen nodded emphatically. Yes, the items include a watermelon, multiple bags, and potentially glass containers. It's a safety issue. I bit back a feral laugh. Glass containers. Hide the jam, it's a weapon. The elevator beeped in protest at being held hostage by stupidity. My arms were starting to shake. The watermelon had entered a long-term relationship with gravity. I set it down, gently, on the elevator floor. It made a dignified thunk, like a bass drum clearing its throat. Officers are on their way, Karen announced, triumphant. Please wait right here. I looked at the watermelon. I looked, in my thought, at my apartment door, 2 floors up, whispering sweet promises of air conditioning and dignity. Then I looked at Karen, whose smile said she'd just booked front-row tickets to my humiliation. Great, I said. I'll keep the evidence fresh. We stood in a lobby saturated with lavender air freshener and the hum of fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look like they haven't slept since 1998. Through the glass, the courtyard sprinklers misted the lawn as if blessing this farce. A teenager skateboarded past, glanced in, and decided adulthood was canceled. Minutes stretched. Karen paced, composing what would no doubt become a neighborhood email with 12 bullet points and 3 passive-aggressive PSs. I leaned against the elevator railing and ate another peach, because at this point I was morally obligated. The juice dripped onto my wristwatch. Time, sticky and sweet, marched on. Then, faintly, sirens. Not dramatic, not racing, just that lazy city wail that says someone, somewhere, is about to ask really, 100 times. Karen's eyes lit up like a stadium. She straightened her cardigan. She adjusted the clipboard. She was ready. And that was when I decided. I might be the idiot being investigated for grocery smuggling, but I was not going to be the punchline. If she wanted a show, fine. I'd give her one. I picked up the watermelon like a peace offering from Tartarus and waited, smiling, peach sticky and unbothered, as the patrol car rolled to the curb. The doors opened. 2 officers stepped out, taking in the scene. Me, sweating and fruity. Karen, vibrating with righteousness. A watermelon sitting like Exhibit A. Showtime. The officers entered with the cautious energy of people who've been burned by HOA politics before. Officer 1 was tall and tired. Officer 2 had the kind of calm that suggested nothing surprised her anymore, not even a fruit-based felony. Karen pounced. Officers, thank you for responding so quickly. This resident, she carved the air in my direction like she was slicing ham, has been stealing communal groceries and threatening me. Officer 2 looked at the watermelon, then at the peach in my hand, then at me. Sir, she said, is that your watermelon? As much as anything can be owned in this late capitalist clown car, I said. Yes, I can produce a receipt and a sore shoulder. Officer 1 cleared his throat. Ma'am, what do you mean by communal groceries? Karen blinked, as if the phrase explained itself. He brought them into a shared space. That makes them subject to community allocation. Officer 2's eyebrows did a little high five. That's not how groceries work. Karen thrust the clipboard forward. Page 12, Section C. Shared amenities are to be fairly distributed. I leaned in. Shared amenities means the pool and the barbecue. Not my yogurt. Officer 1 held up a hand. Let's keep it simple. Sir, do you live here? Yes. Apartment 3B. Mail address to me. Keys to prove it. Also, my cat has already declared this territory with disapproval. Officer 2. And you bought these items yourself? With legal tender and a coupon for coffee I'll regret. I can show you the receipt, but it's in a bag currently being held hostage by HOA Gravity. Karen snapped. He refused to cooperate with a community event. We asked for refreshments. And I declined to donate a bowling ball full of juice, I said. I did, however, offer chips, which is generosity, not a subpoena. Officer 1 turned to Karen, gentle but firm. This sounds like a civil matter, not a criminal one. She drew herself up. He menaced me with a watermelon. Silence. Even the elevator seemed to stare. Officer 2 finally said, Did he brandish it? I set it down carefully, I said. If I'd brandished it, you'd have heard the national anthem. Karen's mouth made a thin horizontal line, like a paper cut. He also refused to register his deliveries. These are not deliveries, I repeated. They're groceries carried by arms. You can tell by the sweat and my slow spiritual decline. Officer 1 nodded. Okay, sir, you're free to take your things upstairs. Karen sputtered. You can't just. He'll destroy the community kitchen with fruit water. If I spill, I'll mop, I said. And I'll even use the approved HOA mop with the compliant bristles. Officer 2 turned to me, professional. Would you mind showing us some ID to close this out? I dug out my wallet, leaving sticky peach fingerprints on my sanity. While Officer 2 radioed something short and bored-sounding, Karen circled the watermelon like it might confess if she stared hard enough. Mr. Diaz reappeared, drifting on the slow breeze of nosy compassion. Everything okay? Emergency resolved, I said. The watermelon has agreed to a plea deal. He nodded sagely. First offense. Officer 1 handed me my ID. All good. Try not to escalate. Karen gasped. You can't reward him for defiance. Officer 2's smile was courteous and indestructible. Ma'am, we're not rewarding anyone. We're leaving. If there's an actual crime, call us. Grocery theft is a crime, Karen insisted. From a store? Not from a trunk to a fridge, Officer 2 said. Have a good evening. They left with the measured relief of people escaping a group chat. The patrol car slid away. I was left in the lobby with Karen, my groceries, and the electric buzz of a fluorescent tube contemplating early retirement. Karen pivoted to me. This isn't over. Of course not, I said. It's an HOA. It never ends, it just refreshes. She stepped closer, dropping her voice into a serious register usually reserved for space launches. Cedar Pines has standards. Generosity. Participation. Your attitude endangers cohesion. My attitude endangers fruit monopolies, I said. Different threat matrix. Her eyes glittered. Emergency board session. Tomorrow night. We'll address your repeated violations, including non-compliant doormat humor and the unauthorized display of succulents. My doormat says, oh no, not you again. It's aspirational. You will receive a formal notice. She plucked a peach pit out of the trash, like collecting a fingerprint. And we will be reviewing your groceries list. That's not a thing. It is now. She marched off, heels cracking like a gavel. I stood very still until the echo died. Then I loaded my bags back into my arms, cradled the watermelon like a grumpy saint holding a planet, and mashed the elevator button. Upstairs, my apartment exhaled around me. My cat, Marmalade, round, judgmental, and morally opposed to cardio, sat in the doorway and inspected the bags like TSA with whiskers. I set the watermelon on the counter. It looked relieved to be off duty. I washed my hands, made a sandwich, and read the HOA bylaws because I am that kind of fun. They were a fever dream of petty tyrannies. No visible laundry, no unauthorized sky-colored lights, and my favorite, a ban on collegiate flags longer than the flag of this nation. There was no clause about groceries, shockingly, which meant Karen was making it up as she went along, standard issue. 2 hours later, the newsletter arrived. Subject: Community Values Under Threat. Author: Karen, obviously. It accused an uncooperative resident, Hi, of refusing to support communal events, insulting a board member, and hoarding perishables. She'd attached a grainy photo of the watermelon in the lobby like it was a mugshot. I laughed, choked on my sandwich, and then laughed harder. Fine. If she wanted a board meeting, I'd bring a binder. Also chips. I texted Mr. Diaz, "You going to the emergency session?" He replied with a single emoji, a skull. Then, "I'll bring earplugs." And notes from the time Karen tried to ticket my grandson's tricycle for reckless parking. I spent an hour constructing a very legalistic yet petty set of tabs: grocery rights, bylaw interpretations, MOP certification. I printed my receipt in triplicate and highlighted the coffee like it was contraband. My plan was simple. Don't just win. Narrate the win so publicly that Karen couldn't bury it under lavender air freshener. At 10 p.m., a paper slid under my door. I didn't even need to open it to smell the sanctimony. Notice of violation, it blared. Item 1. Unauthorized transfer of communal produce. Item 2. Disorderly conduct in lobby. Item 3. Sarcasm in presence of board president. I framed it on my fridge next to a postcard and a magnet shaped like a croissant. Marmalade stared at it, then me, then yawned like a judge. Tomorrow, I told her, we go to war over groceries. She blinked slowly, which I took as legal consent. I slept just fine, because there's a kind of fatigue that's actually fuel. By morning, I decided to raise the stakes, publicly, politely, with a touch of theater. Karen lived for optics. I was going to hand her a mirror. I drafted a flyer, community teach-in, what's actually in the bylaws, and what isn't. Snacks provided by a private citizen's private wallet. I slid copies under doors like a paper Santa. Then I packed a tote with the binder, chips, and a single, menacing peach. On my way out, I passed the bulletin board. New notice. Emergency session tonight, 7 p.m. agenda. Grocery incident, tone of new residents, fruit policies, proposed. At the bottom, in tiny print, refreshments provided by community fund. I grinned. The bait was out. Time to see which fish thought it was a shark. The Cedar Pines community room is exactly what you'd expect from an HOA meeting space. Beige walls, beige carpet, and a level of fluorescent lighting that could interrogate a confession out of a light bulb. There were folding chairs in a sad little horseshoe, a card table for the board, aka Karen and her loyal lieutenants, and a stale smell that suggested someone once spilled a latte in 2006, and no one has forgiven them since. I arrived early, not because I'm eager, but because I wanted to pick the seat directly opposite Karen. She couldn't make eye contact without looking like we were in a Western standoff. I set my tote bag on the floor, chips visible, binder front and center. The peach sat on the table in front of me like a silent witness. Neighbors trickled in. Mr. Diaz gave me a nod and a smirk. The Henderson twins, who always look like they're plotting something involving super glue, sat 2 rows back. Even Linda from 4C came, wearing her legalized basil t-shirt. Long story. Karen once tried to ban potted herbs on balconies for attracting pests. At 6:59, Karen swept in like she was entering Parliament. She had a new blazer, the kind that says, "I bill by the hour," and she slammed her clipboard on the table with the gravitas of a Supreme Court justice. If the Supreme Court cared about doormats. "Order," she announced. "This emergency session of the Cedar Pines HOA is now in progress." Someone coughed. Someone else opened a soda. Karen launched into her opening statement. "As you know, our community thrives on shared values, mutual respect, and responsible stewardship of resources. Unfortunately, we have experienced a serious breach of these principles." She looked straight at me, the way nature documentary hosts look at hyenas. "On the evening of August 8th, she continued, a resident, new to our community, brought in an excessive quantity of groceries without registering them for community allocation. When approached, he was verbally hostile, refused to contribute to an upcoming event, and consumed produce in the common area without permission. She paused for dramatic effect. This kind of behavior cannot be tolerated. I raised my hand. Karen didn't acknowledge me. Furthermore, she said, when officers arrived, this resident mocked the process, displayed sarcasm, and brandished a large watermelon in a menacing fashion. I couldn't help it. Objection, Your Honor. It was cradled, not brandished. Snickers rippled through the room. Mr. Diaz muttered something that sounded suspiciously like, "Fruit court is in session." Karen's jaw tightened. "We will have a period for statements later. For now, I will present the evidence." She held up a printed photo of the watermelon in the lobby, taken from the least flattering angle possible. It looked like the security camera was judging it. "This," she said, "is Exhibit A. Note the aggressive placement." I glanced at Mr. Diaz. He whispered, "Aggressive placement is my new band name." Karen slapped down another sheet, a blurry printout of a peach pit in a trash can. Exhibit B, evidence of consumption in a shared space. Linda from 4C raised her hand. "Karen, you eat muffins in the lobby every Thursday." "That's different," Karen snapped. "How?" Linda asked, too sweetly. "It's muffins." I couldn't resist. And muffins, as we all know, are a diplomatic food, while peaches are weapons of mass disruption. More laughter. Karen's cheeks turned the exact shade of a ripe tomato, which I briefly considered adding to the evidence pile. Karen cleared her throat, regaining her grip on the performance. "The board proposes a new rule. All food items brought into the building must be reported and, when appropriate, contributed to community functions." You could feel the collective mental eyebrow raise in the room. Mr. Diaz piped up. "So if I buy eggs, I gotta share them?" Karen shot him a look. "If they are surplus to your needs. What if I eat a lot of omelets?" Then, she faltered. "Then that would be noted." At that point, I decided it was time to roll out my opening move. I reached into my tote bag, pulled out my binder, and flipped it open to a tab labeled in bold red letters, Bylaws versus Make-Believe. According to Section 4, subsection B, I said, shared amenities are defined as physical property owned collectively by the HOA. This includes the pool, gym, barbecue, and laundry facilities. It does not, shockingly, include my cereal. Karen waved a dismissive hand. "The spirit of the bylaws." "The spirit of the bylaws is not enforceable law." I cut in. "I also have a receipt from my grocery store, timestamped the exact hour of this alleged melon menace. Want me to submit it for the record?" I slid it across the table. She didn't touch it, like it might bite. The Henderson twins were grinning now. Linda was nodding so hard, she looked like she was trying to launch into orbit. Karen inhaled slowly, regrouping. "This is not about technicalities. This is about harmony in our community." "Nothing says harmony like calling the cops on a watermelon," I said. That's when I revealed my second move, the flyer. I pulled one out and held it up. "Since there's so much confusion, I've invited residents to a Know Your Bylaws session this Saturday. I'll bring snacks. Don't worry. They'll be from my own wallet, and I promise not to menace anyone with them." The room broke into murmurs. Karen looked like she'd bitten a lemon she didn't authorize. She opened her mouth to respond, then noticed Officer 2 from the night before standing in the doorway, holding a clipboard of her own. And oh, did the air shift. The murmurs died instantly, like someone had hit the mute button on the entire room. Officer 2, still calm, still with that faint smirk that said I've seen worse, but not much worse, stepped inside. "Evening," she said. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop off the incident report from the other night." Karen's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Perfect. Please, officer, read it to the board so everyone can understand the seriousness of the situation." Officer 2 looked at me, then at Karen. "It's pretty short." Karen gestured dramatically. "Go ahead." The officer cleared her throat and began. Responded to call about alleged theft of communal groceries. Spoke to complainant and resident. Determined groceries were purchased by resident for personal use. No evidence of theft or threat. Situation resolved on site. She flipped the page. That's it. You could almost hear Karen's balloon of self-importance deflate. That's not the spirit of what happened, Karen said quickly. He brandished a watermelon. Officer 2 cut in, looking at me. Is this the watermelon in question? I tapped my binder. Currently in my kitchen. Untouched. I could bring it down for testimony if needed. The room laughed. Mr. Diaz whispered loudly. Put it under oath. Karen tried again. He mocked the process in front of law enforcement. Officer 2 shrugged. He made a joke. That's not illegal. If it was, half my family would be doing life without parole. I leaned back, savoring the moment like the first sip of cold lemonade on a hot day. Karen's voice rose. You're undermining the board's authority. No, the officer said evenly. I'm clarifying the difference between authority and imagination. That one landed so hard, I thought the beige carpet might sprout applause. Karen pressed her lips together until they almost disappeared. Regardless, we have the right to propose new rules to prevent future incidents. I flipped to another tab in my binder labeled HOA Rule Creation Process. Sure, you can propose a rule, I said, but it requires a 2/3 majority vote from homeowners, not just the board. And every proposed rule has to be consistent with state property law, which, fun fact, doesn't recognize produce as a shared resource. Linda raised her hand. So, if we vote no, this whole fruit drama ends? Correct, I said. Karen shot her a glare that could curdle milk. Voting against this measure is voting against community values. Mr. Diaz raised his hand. We're voting for keeping our groceries to ourselves. The Henderson twins chimed in together. We vote for keeping our groceries. The wave started there. Hands going up, people nodding, someone in the back saying, this is ridiculous. By the time we counted, it wasn't even close. The proposed food-sharing policy died a loud, public death right there on the card table. Karen looked like she'd swallowed her own clipboard. That's when I made my final move. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a sealed Tupperware. Inside, freshly cut watermelon slices. I set it gently on the table between us. For the community, I said sweetly. Completely voluntary. The room held. Even Officer 2 cracked a full smile. Karen didn't touch it. The meeting adjourned with people still chuckling, and I left with my tote a little lighter and my victory smelling faintly of summer fruit. But here's the thing about people like Karen, they don't lose gracefully. And I had a sinking suspicion that somewhere in her condo fortress, she was already hatching the next emergency. And I was right, because the next morning, I woke up to a brand new notice slipped under my door. Violation, unauthorized distribution of perishables in a board meeting. Oh, game on. By now, my fridge door looked like the trophy wall of a petty tyrant's favorite enemy. For bright yellow HOA violation notices, each more ridiculous than the last. But this newest one, unauthorized distribution of perishables in a board meeting, wasn't just petty. It was art. And art deserves an audience. I grabbed my coffee, my binder, and my phone. 15 minutes later, the notice was posted in our buildings group chat along with a photo of the Tupperware from last night and the caption. Apparently, sharing watermelon is a crime now. Somebody called the fruit police. The replies came in fast. Linda, for C, do muffins count as contraband? Asking for a friend. Mr. Diaz, 2, I guess I'll turn myself in for aiding and abetting a peach. The Henderson twins, photo of bananas taped together with illegal written in Sharpie. By noon, half the building was in open rebellion. Someone taped a paper sign to the lobby bulletin board that read, Free produce exchange. Take what you need, no permit required. By 2 o'clock, there were apples, oranges, and a suspiciously large zucchini sitting on the table under it. By 4 o'clock, Karen had taped her own sign over it. This is not an HOA authorized activity. By 4:15, someone had taped a third sign under hers. Okay, Karen. The next HOA board meeting wasn't scheduled for weeks, but I wasn't about to wait that long for the encore. Instead, I filed a formal request, under our own bylaws, for a membership special session to address misuse of violation notices. It was a boring-sounding grenade, and everyone showed up. I started with the receipts, literally. I passed around the grocery slip from the watermelon incident, highlighting the personal purchase section. Then I held up the violation notices one by one, reading them aloud with all the dramatic gravitas of a Shakespearean tragedy. When I got to the last one, I paused, opened my tote bag, and pulled out a stack of small paper plates. "I'd like to enter into evidence," I said, "a peace offering." From the bag came another Tupperware, this time filled with fresh watermelon slices. I began handing them out. Please note, entirely voluntary participation, no coercion, no community funds used. People laughed, they ate, they nodded. It was perfect. Karen, of course, was vibrating with fury. This is exactly the behavior that undermines the authority of the board. Actually, I said, flipping to the right tab in my binder, our bylaws state that violation notices must be tied to an actual, documented breach of rules. Making up rules about food? Not covered. The crowd murmured in agreement. I turned the knife, politely. And according to Section 9, any board member who repeatedly issues baseless violations can be subject to a vote of removal by the community. Now that got the room buzzing. Mr. Diaz stood up. I moved to put it to a vote. Hands went up everywhere. Even Linda raised both. The count wasn't even close. Karen was officially removed as HOA President. The look on her face? Worth every sticky peach I'd ever eaten. She left the meeting in a huff, blazer flapping like a retreating flag. The new acting president, Mr. Diaz, bless him, adjourned the session with a grin. Fruit rules. Eat what you want, share if you want, and for God's sake, don't call the cops over groceries. That night, the building smelled faintly of cut melon and victory. Marmalade the cat sat by the window, tail flicking, clearly pleased with my work. I taped the final violation notice on the fridge, right in the center. My little war trophy. And as I poured myself a drink, I thought, if Karen ever tries this again, I'm buying 2 watermelons. One to eat, and one for evidence. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.